Okay, so last time we left off, we just solved those one-step equations with inverse operations up top. And I left you those 3 at the bottom to try. And so I'm just going to show you those answers down below now. Finish working this very last one here, where once again I cancel those out. And f equals -2. So I substitute those back in, and you can also see down there where I have checked those answers to make sure that it made sense and that they were correct. Alrighty. So our next one is going to be one-step equations with inverse operations, and that first page was adding and subtracting, and these ones have multiplication and division involved, these equations. So this first one I have -6 times a equals 12. So something times -6 equals a positive 12. Well, I need to undo multiplication. So in order to do that, I'm going to do its inverse, and the inverse of multiplication is division. And I'm going to divide that number by itself, because any number divided by itself gives me a 1. So now I have 1a, which is exactly what I want, or I can just write it simply as a. These are the same thing. Whatever I do to one side of my equation, I still have to do to the other side. So I'm going to divide this one, other side, by -6 as well, and 12 divided by 6 is 2. I have a 1 negative sign in my problem, and 1 is an odd number, so my answer is -2. And when I go to check that, I can say -6 times -2 equals a positive 12, and that is true, so I know my answer is right. This next one, I have 1/2 times x equals 8, and when I say that, that means 1/2 of some number is 8. So this is multiplication. I could also write this as division. So I could think of it as 1/2 times x, or x divided by 2. They end up being the same thing. So I can either multiply by the reciprocal of this number, so that 2 times 1 is 2, 1 times 2 is 2, 2 over 2 is 1, or I could cross-reduce ahead of time. Either way, I end up with an x there. And I'm going to multiply this side by 2 as well, and so I get an answer of 16, and half of 16 does indeed equal 8 there. If I think of it this way, then I'm going to do x over 2 equals 8. I'm going to multiply that by 2, so same thing as I did over there. My 2's cancel out. All I have is x, and 8 times 2 is once again 16. I've already done this one down here. I've got -4y over -4 because I needed to divide that to get rid of it, and then I did -20 divided by 4, and I get y equals 5. So -4 times 5, does that equal -20? And it sure does. Down here, I've got x over 5, and I went ahead and rewrote that just so it was a little plainer to see. So x over 5, I multiplied both sides by 5, and I got 30. So this is just like the other option of doing it up there. This one I have, and you can pause right here if you want to try this one before I go over it. And I'm dividing by -3, so the inverse of that is multiplication, so I'm going to multiply by -3. Those cancel out, and I get y equals 21. So is 21 divided by -3 -7? It sure is. And over here, 30 divided by 5 equals 6. And yes, it does. Over here, this is one that's a little trickier. And this is 3 over 2x. But I can also think of that as 3 over 2, or 3/2 x, like that. And it helps me see that I can then multiply by the reciprocal, which is 2/3. Those cancel out. I just get left with x over here. When I multiply by the reciprocal 2/3 over here, I get -6 times 2. I could say that's -12 over 3, which is what I did down here. I could also cross-reduce ahead of time and get a 1 down here, and then a -2 up here, which all of those would have given me a -4. And 3/2 times -4, does that equal -6? Well, I get -12 divided by 2, and that does equal -6. When I go into multi-step equations, it's just important to remember that I have to take care of addition and subtraction first. So if I have 2 steps to my equation here, I have 8 times some number plus 5. So there's 2 steps, and that's going to equal 29. So I subtract the 5 from both sides first. And when I do that, 5 minus 5 gives me 0. So these cancel out. 29 minus 5 is 24. So then I'm left with that equation right there. Well, I know how to solve this one-step equation. It's 8 times some number equals 24. Inverse of multiplication is division. So I'm going to divide by 8. 24 divided by 8 is 3. We're going to put that to work here. And we're going to add in some distributive property, which we've been working on. So I'm going to pass out the 3. So 3 times x and 3 times negative 5. So I get 3x minus 15. I can't forget about this part right here. I need to make sure that I bring it down. What we've been working with then is we need to combine like terms. And I also think about this as being 2 separate sides here. So I'm going to combine like terms here. I cannot combine that 17 in quite yet. So negative 15 and negative 4 is going to give me a negative 19. So I have 3x minus 19 equals 17. Now to get rid of that negative 19 and get the 3x by itself, which is my end goal, negative 19 plus 19, those cancel out. I still have a 3x. 17 plus 19 gives me 36. Well, 3 times what number equals 36? So I divide, and x equals 12. And I can still go back and check to make sure that does indeed work. And it does indeed work out. Last thing we're going to talk about are inequalities. I'm going to show 2 different inequalities here. This is a 1-step inequality. This is a 2-step inequality. And if you understand how to solve equations, these are exactly the same, only instead of an equal sign, I have an equality sign. So I'm going to go ahead and subtract my 5 here from both sides. And I end up with x is greater than negative 2. So if I start at 0 here, negative 1, negative 2, I need to graph these because it's not an exact answer. It's everything that's greater than negative 2. Since I don't want to include negative 2, there's no line underneath here that says greater than or equal to, I put an open circle. Greater than would go to the right. So that means that everything going this way is a possible answer there. Everything greater than 2 is a possible answer. Over here, I've got my 2-step, and once again, I treat this like an equal sign until I get to the bottom and I need to graph it. So I had 2x minus 5 is greater than or equal to 7. So I add 5 to both sides. Those cancel out. I get 2x is greater than or equal to 12. 2x divided by 2 on both sides gives me x is greater than or equal to 6. And this one, it says, is greater than or equal to. So I'm going to fill in my dot this time, just because of that line there. And it's going to be everything going to greater than 6.